Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and today we're going to take a look at how to add graphics options to your games. Now, just as an example of what we're going to do here, we've got this little build here, and I'm going to click on graphics options, and basically we're going to add a way to control what resolution your game has, so we can switch to a bunch of different resolutions here, whether it's full screen or whether it has Vsync applied. So if I apply changes here, you can see we can change the size of our little window, like so, and we can make it full screen like that. We also change the resolution while we're in full screen too. So we're going to see how we can do exactly that. Let's put it back to that size so we can see it all. Okay, so I'm going to close out of this and exit out of this. So to do this, we're going to have a basic starter pack that we'll use to set up all our menus, because we don't want to just sit here and learn how to create a menu. You should already know how to do that and how to use buttons for your functions. If you don't know how to do that, you can look up the Game Essentials tutorials, which I have here on the channel, which are the most recent tutorials that we did. That will take you through that process. But if you already do know that, what we're going to do is, down below the video, you will find a link to this Unity asset package. And we're just going to click and drag this into Unity here, into a new blank project that I have set up. So there's nothing else going on in this project apart from the package that we're about to drag in. And once that finishes importing, there we go. So this has some simple scripts I've made, and also the UI pack from Kenny.nl. Kenny makes amazing free to use art assets, so we're going to take advantage of that. First thing we're going to do is load up the start scene, so I'm going to click on that here, and we'll see we have this basic setup screen with a title, a couple of buttons, and if I turn on the graphics settings panel here, we have this setup. Now, all that's set up at the moment within this is, if I play the game here, we can close out of this window like so. And when we have it on apply changes too, we'll change that. And we have these buttons that can do things, but they don't actually do anything. So we're going to set up the code to understand how we're going to do that. Now, all the code that we need to do this is actually very simple and very straightforward. So what we'll do is, on our graphics settings panel object here, we have a graphics menu attached to it, and this is what's going to control everything we do. Now, all our buttons, so if I drop this down and go to, say, the apply changes button down here, you can see this is set up to go to graphic menu.apply changes, because that goes to the graphic menu script is here, and it calls the apply changes function within that. So let's open up this script and see what have we got and what do we want to do. Takes a second to open up. There we go. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see, so everyone can see what's going on here. So you can see we've got a few simple functions built in here. We've got resolution left, resolution right, apply changes, and close panel. I'm actually going to remove the close panel function from there, because I don't want, when we apply our changes, we want it to apply to our graphics rather than just closing out that window. So I'm just going to do that, and we'll go back into Unity, and we can see we've got resolution left, right, apply, and close. So that corresponds with the 4 different buttons we have here. So we've got the left, right, apply, and close. Okay, so let's go back in here. Now we want to say we want to update our various things. Now, obviously, the top of our list is our resolutions, but that's the slightly more complex bit. So we're going to start off first of all with the full screen and Vsync functions here. So if we want to access these, we basically want to know if our player is having these marked as true or false. Well, then we need to be able to access these checkboxes, or as they're called in Unity, toggles. So you can see here we've got our full screen toggle and Vsync toggle. So if we go back into our script here, we'll need a reference to them. So to be able to access any Unity UI functionality, we need to go up to the top and say using Unity engine.ui, and then down here we'll say public toggle, let's say full screen toggle, that should be a small f, and we'll say public toggle Vsync toggle, like so. So we're going to set this up so that these things will automatically happen when we click on those buttons, so they'll change straight away. We'll see how we do that, and then we'll actually take that away, and we'll explain why we take that away too. So let's go back in here. So we've got these. If we wanted them to actually do something, well, we're going to need some functions for that to work. So we're going to create a new function, public void, let's say apply full screen, like so. And then we'll also do, just below this, public void apply vsync. So basically what we'll do is essentially we're going to say that this function will be called whenever we change whether the toggle is set to be true or false. So basically as soon as we click on this little thing here, it'll switch between being active or inactive. So to do that, we'll go into our apply full screen here, and we're going to say if our full screen toggle, so the full screen toggle that we just set up, and we just check and see if that is on. So if it's on, that means the checkbox is in it, or the check mark is in it, and if it's not, then the check mark is not. So if full screen toggle dot is on, oh, that should be a capital O. Well, if it's on, then we want to make sure that our full screen is set to be true. So how do we make our screen turn into full screen mode? All we have to do is type screen dot full screen equals true. So screen dot full screen is how we control whether our display should be active or not. Or sorry, our full screen display should be active or not. So if our toggle is on, then our full screen should be true. But if it's not on, well, then our full screen should be false. Screen.fullscreen equals false. Okay, so I'm going to save this. But rather than just going in and seeing how that works, we're going to go ahead and do our vsync as well. Simply because we can't actually demonstrate this within the Unity editor. We'll have to build our game to see how it works, but we will do that after we do our vsync here. So for vsync, how that is controlled within Unity, if we go over to here, file, and go to edit, project settings, and quality over here, you can see we have a vsync count option down here, and this basically controls whether you have vsync on or not on your project. So here you can say don't sync, you can have every vblank and every second vblank. We're only going to worry about don't sync and every vblank for now. So for this to work, basically rather than having to type in the name of this, you instead pass in a value to the vsync count. So let's see how that works. Let's go back in here. So much like we did with the full screen, we're going to say if vsync toggle dot is on. So we'll say if our vsync toggle is on, then we want to make sure that vsync is happening. So how we access the vsync is, well, we know we just went to the quality settings here, and we can actually do the exact same thing to apply the changes. So we can say quality settings, like so, quality settings dot vsync count. And when we want our vsync to be on, we set it to be 1. Now there's different values that you can actually set for this. I think 0, 1, 2, 3, I think, and maybe 4. But we're only going to worry about 0 and 1. The other values are different values that you would want to use for different situations, but we're just worrying about the basic vsync being on. So vsync count equals 1 for when we're on, and when we want it not to be on, then we can say quality settings dot vsync count equals 0. Okay, we'll save this and let's go back into Unity and see if this is working for us. So we'll let it compile. Then we're going to go to our graphics settings panel here. Then we're going to full screen toggle, and we're going to add a new function to this, like so. So we add a slot, drag our graphics panel into there, then go to graphics menu and apply full screen. And we'll do the same for the vsync. Click and drag into there and apply vsync. Okay, so both of those should be working for us now. So if I hit play, now as I said, the problem is we can't do full screen within the Unity editor, so we're going to have to build this to demonstrate that, but we can demonstrate vsync because although we look at this and we don't see anything happening. Oh, we've got an error. Of course, we've got an error because on our graphics setting panel, we didn't actually set these into the slot that we created for them. So we need to drag our full screen toggle into there and our Vsync toggle into there. Now, although they didn't actually visually do anything because we had an error, it still won't actually do anything if we play, if we're just looking at the screen. So I'm going to set this not to maximize, and we're going to go back to the quality settings here. There we go. And if you keep your eye on Vsync count over here, by default it's on every V blank. Now if I hit play, we see our Vsync is checkmarked, and if I uncheck it, now we have don't sync. So I can keep switching it on and off here. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. We wanted to decide what it's doing with that. And now, of course, we can't get the full screen to show. So what we're going to do is quickly build this. So I'm going to go to build settings and build. And here we go. We're going to say graphics menu. This will just take a couple of seconds to build because it's not exactly a lot in this project. Now you might notice we didn't, as you would normally do when building a project, you normally drag your scene into the scenes in build view here, but because we've only got one scene in our game, we don't really need to do that. But of course, it's good practice to do it in general. Okay, so we've got some default settings here. I'm going to hit play. And we've got all this stuff. So now, if I uncheck full screen, you can see we switch to a windowed view, like so, and we can hit full screen to go back to being a full screen view. Okay, so we'll close out this. And there we go. We have our full screen and our Vsync switching now working perfectly. So with that in mind now, let's look at how we can switch between our resolutions. Now, if we want to switch between resolutions, obviously we're going to need a way to store which resolutions we're going to use. We could store them individually in two different lists, but what we're going to do instead is create a list of custom objects that we're going to use. So we're going to go into our folder here, and I'm going to right click and create a new C# script that we'll call resolution type. And this is basically just going to be an object that we can use to store two values, a width and a height. Because if we go back in here, we've got 1920 by 1080, so we've 1920 width, 1080 pixels high. So to do that, I'm going to remove our start and our update. I'm going to create a public int width, like so, and a public int height. Now we want this to be an object that can be listed within our graphics menu script, but we don't want it to be a list of individual objects. We don't want to create a whole bunch of objects that we're basically referring to as like prefabs or anything like that. So to do that, what we'll do is remove mono behavior here. So this just becomes a generic class. And then above it, we're going to put in square brackets system dot serializable. And the reason we do that is basically so that Unity knows that this is a simple class object that when it's serializable, that means it can be displayed within the editor for our uses. So we'll go back in here and we have our resolution script, and that's perfectly fine. Then we need to go back into our graphics menu. So I'll reopen it here. We're going to go back up to the top, and we're going to create a list of those resolution types that we just made. So public resolution type. We're not going to create a list, sorry, we're going to create an array of them. Resolution type, and we'll call this resolutions. So you'll see now, if I save this and go back into Unity, once it compiles, we go back to our graphics setting panel, and we see we've got resolutions here now. If I just put this up to 3, you can see we've got a width and a height, a width and a height, and a width and a height on each individual one. So it's a very simple way to do that. So I'm just going to set up some simple values here. So let's say 1920 by 1080, 1280 by 720, and 1366 by 768. So those are three of the most common kind of display resolutions that you'll see for most machines these days, or at least 16 by 9 resolutions, which we're going to stick to for this project. So let's go back into our graphics menu now. So when we want to switch between our different resolutions, well, we'll need a way to keep track of where we are in the list of resolutions. So say, for example, we're on the first one, that's 1920, and we hit right, then we need to go to 1280 by 720. So we'll obviously need a value to keep track of that. So we'll create a public int selected res, so selected resolution. And then when we want to start switching between them, well, if we want to go left, we need to make sure that we're not going too far left, so we don't want to go below 0, for example. So we'll say if our selected resolution currently is greater than 0, so as long as we're above 0, then we'll take away 1. So we'll say selected resolution minus minus. So we're saying if your resolution currently selected is 1 or 2, because we only have 3 spaces, if it's 1 or 2, take away, but if it's 0, then don't take away anymore, because we can't go below 0 in our array. So if we know that, we'll do the exact same thing for going right. We can say if our selected resolution this time, rather than being greater than 0, we're going to say less than the resolutions dot length. Oh, let's try it again. There we go. Resolutions dot length. Let's just put in our bracket here, selected resolution plus plus. Now, the only thing with this, of course, if you haven't used arrays too much, but if you have, you should know that the resolution's length, we put 3 objects in our array, which means the length would be 3. And of course, if we set our selected resolution to be 3, so if it was 2, it could add 1 more to go up to 3. Well, then we would be at position 3 in our array, and that wouldn't exist, so it would give us an error. So what we'll do is go back in here and say resolution.length minus 1. So as long as the selected resolution is less than, in our example, 2 would be the formula over here. So as long as it's less than 2, then add 1 onto it. So in that situation, now we're going to do the next stage, which is, okay, well, if we're switching left to right, we need to update what it says on the screen here, because in our little box we need to pass that information to the player. So we'll say we'll actually need a reference to that that text within that box. So we'll say up here in our references up here, we'll say public text, just res text for resolution text. So text being a UI text object. And then down here we can go, okay, get that res text object, access the text box within it, which is res text.text, and then we're going to set that to be equal to our resolutions array at whatever position our currently selected resolution is, so selected res, and we want to get the dot width that we've set up, and then we're going to just say plus space x space, and the reason we do that is because we want it to look like we have the width here, then a space, then x, then space, and then the height. So we'll do the exact same thing here. I'll just copy and paste this dot height. Did I spell height wrong back in here? No, why are we getting it? Oh, because we didn't put the plus there. There we go. Okay, so that's fine. We'll do the exact same thing in our resolution right. So let's just see if this works for us. We'll let that compile back in Unity, and we'll make sure we drop our resolution text into here. So if we go down here, we have a resolution box, and then within that we have a text box in there, which is, if I click on this, you can see that is that box. Okay, we slotted that into place, so now we can hit play, and you can see we can switch between our different resolutions. So let's see how we can apply those resolutions. So if we go back into our script, down below that we're just going to say, because both of these both of these scripts are going to be doing the exact same thing. So we've now got two different lines of code that are going to be called in the exact same way. What we're going to do is add a new function. So we're going to say public void set resolution, like so. And we're actually going to leave this line in this function for reasons that will become a little bit more clear later on. So what we'll do is within this one, we'll call the set resolution function we just created, like so. And then within our set resolution function, we want to actually set the resolution that we have. And to do that, we go, much like we did with full screen, we did screen.fullscreen. This time we're going to say screen.set resolution. And here we'll say in our brackets, so we can see we're going to put in a width, a height, and whether we are full screen or not. So whenever you set the resolution, you have to actually say whether you want it to be full screened. Of course, we know we already have that value being accessed for us. So we're going to need the width, so we'll go into our resolutions array, get wherever we are in our currently selected resolution, and we want to get the width. Then for the height, we'll do the exact same thing. I'm going to copy this, paste it, dot height. And in full screen, we know we get that from where our full screen toggle is on. So we can copy our full screen toggle is on and paste that in there. And then we'll hit our semicolon. So save that, go back into Unity. Again, let it compile. And the only problem is if I hit play here, we won't see any changes happening because within the editor, again, it won't actually have the power to change those options. So we need to quickly build again. Build. And then once that's built for us, there we go. I'll open this up. And now, when we hit left or right, you can see we're switching between them. Our full screen is on or off. And you can see we can switch between them and our window size changes. So perfect. That's working exactly where we want to. Now all our various buttons are now working the way we want them to. But, so I could add that. The problem is when you have a menu like this, in most games in general, you'll see this. When you have switching between your different resolutions like that, it'll never do it instantly. It'll never happen straight away because it's really unintuitive for the player for it to happen straight away. And also, say for example, if someone has a tiny little screen, so say they only have a 720p screen, and if we look at our menu here, so they click over to 1920 by 1080, and then say maybe rather than just, if we have it on windowed mode, basically what would happen is if you had your menu on this side of the screen for some reason and you made it suddenly big to 1920 by 1080, then all you would see would be this area of the screen here, and suddenly you can't switch back to the original resolution that you had. So that's no good. So we don't want that to happen. You don't want it to happen just magically when the player is moving between your objects. So what we're going to do is, if we go back in here, we're not going to set our resolution when we move left and right. And we're also not going to apply our full screen and our Vsync as soon as we click on them. So I'm going to go back in here to our graphics panel, and where we have our full screen toggle and our Vsync toggle, I'm going to hit minus here. So with them both selected, I can remove off both of them. And you can see now it's gone off both of those. So they won't actually do the functions that they have. We only want these functions to happen when we hit the Apply Changes button. I already have a function set up on the Apply Changes button. So here, we're going to do set resolution. So we're going to call set resolution to be whatever it's currently set as. We're going to apply our full screen to whatever our toggle currently says. And we're also going to apply Vsync to whatever our toggle currently says. So we'll save this, go back in here. And once again, to demonstrate all this stuff, we're going to have to quickly build it. So file, build. Should only take a second or two. There we go. If I start it again. So we start off with our resolution like this and our full screen and our Vsync. So now when I hit these buttons, nothing happens. And when I switch between, nothing instantly happens. But if I say put that to that, there we go. We've suddenly got a 1280 by 720 screen and our full screen is gone. Instead of 1920, perfect. So that's working the way we want it to, and we can close back out to our main menu and then you could quit your game. But there's one other thing we want to do, which is, if I close and exit this again and start back up. So we know here that our resolution is 1280 by 720 and we're windowed. But if we play, once it loads up, this resolution, by default, we have it just going to the first value. So we have 1920 by 1080, we have full screen is marked as true, and we have Vsync. So now if I just apply changes, now we're suddenly back to our full big screen. So say you could end in a situation where you just changed your resolution for some reason, you didn't change full screen value, you applied your changes, oh no, suddenly I've got full screen out of nowhere. So we don't want that. So we want to make sure that as soon as our menu starts, it gets whatever the current values are. So let's go back into our menu here, and we'll go to our start function. And we're going to, first of all, do the very simple one. So our Vsync and our full screen. For those, what we're going to do is, for our full screen, we're going to say the full screen toggle is on value. We want to set that to be equal to whatever our current screen dot full screen is. So if we already have it full screened, then set our toggle to be true. If it's not full screened, set it to be false. Then down here, we'll say we want to control whether our Vsync happens. So we know with Vsync, we're setting that to either be 0 or 1. So here we can say if quality settings dot Vsync count equals 0. Well, if our Vsync count is 0, that means we've turned Vsync off. So Vsync toggle dot is on equals false. And otherwise, I moved up there. Otherwise, Vsync toggle dot is on equals true. So save again. So that's good. We're now basically setting whether our full screen toggles or our Vsync toggles are on or off based on what's currently going on. So let's, again, we'll just demonstrate that happening. If we go back in here, let it compile, and we'll just build it quickly. And we'll load it up. So I'm going to make sure, yes, so we have a windowed is false. No, windowed, so we're going to set windowed to be true. So this way, full screen should be false when we play. So we'll hit play. And there we go. We see full screen now is false, and our Vsync is still set to true. That's fine. So let's close out of this. Then the final thing we need to do is get a resolution. Now, we only have 3 resolutions set up in our project for us to use. And really, you will want a whole bunch of resolutions because, just as an example, again, I'll just quickly, if I run this build, you can see, oh, there's a whole load of resolutions here. But we're only doing 3 of them for now, just to make it nice and simple for what we're doing. So we're only going to check for those 3 different resolutions. Now, you can always, within Unity, you can limit the available resolutions. So if I go back in here, if we go to player settings, within the build settings, and you go to resolution and presentation, you can say for supported aspect ratios, you can pull out a whole load, so you can get rid of anything that isn't 16 by 9, for example, and that'll really limit how many different options players can have for resolution, which can be useful for lots of different types of games. But for our purposes, we're going to stick with just checking the 3 that we have. And to check that, all we do is, as soon as the game starts, we just basically loop through the whole array of resolutions and check and see is the current resolution equal to one of these. So for that, we create a for loop. So for int I equals 0, while I is less than the resolutions length, resolutions dot length I plus plus, and then we say in here if resolutions array at position I, so starting at 0 going up to the length of the resolutions, if the width of that is equal to screen.width, so screen.width is whatever screen resolution we've set up, so if that's equal to screen.width and resolutions I.height is equal to, you might guess, screen.height. So all we're saying is if that's true, well, that means that whatever position I we're at now is equal to the exact same thing in the resolutions array. So we'll say selected resolution equals I. So say that can be either 0, 1, 2 based on our current array that we have set up. So we set our selected resolution BI, and then of course we need to update what our little box says. So we need to call the same resolution text that we said before. So I'm just going to copy and paste this because there's no reason not to use the exact same bit of code we already have. And we're going to paste it in there. So we'll save this. And we'll go back in here, let it compile. And once it's compiled, again, we can't see this within the Unity editor because we can't switch our resolutions. So I'm going to save our graphics menu. We'll hit play. And we have 1366 set up by default there. Now we know that by default, our game will start off at 1920. So if our script is working the way we want it to, then where are we? There we go. If it's working the way we want it to, it should show that value up on the screen. And there we go. We have our 1366 by 768. So if I go back to 720 and apply those changes and close out of it and run it again, you can see we have it here. We hit play. And perfect. We've got our graphic resolution all set up perfectly. So there we go. We have our graphics menu perfectly working. That's how you can switch between different values. Now, there was one other thing I did mention, which was when we were switching resolutions, we decided not to put this resolution text update within the set resolution function. And the reason we didn't do that, just so we're clear and I don't forget to mention these things, is we need this to happen straight away as soon as we click left or right. But we didn't want to apply the resolution because we wanted to save that for being applied when we hit apply changes down there. But apart from that, everything within this simple little menu is now working the exact way we want to. So that's how you can go ahead and create your own menus and control the visual options that are available to your players.